the US exposure to kind of trade is small. And what I do in my class is like a quiz question. If we look at trade exposure as exports plus imports divided by GDP, how does the US rank in terms of 179 countries in the world? And it turns out that US ranks 177. So it's got very low trade exposure. So think of imports as being only 14% of GDP. So it turns out that other countries have much more serious exposure to the US policy than the US. So the issue, I think, is not just the tariffs, but the uncertainty about how the tariffs are going to be applied. So if we knew what the policy was, like 25% across the board, we could actually figure out the hit in inflation and the hit in GDP. And it is a hit. It is a negative, but it's not a large negative. And I think a lot of the problems are the tariffs on, tariffs off, and different numbers being thrown out. We just don't know. That creates uncertainty.
Right.
Investors don't like uncertainty.
Cam, you've lived in the heart of the collapse of the American textile industry. I mean, in the Carolinas, maybe I'd also put it in the furniture industry as well. What do you say to the fancy elites at Duke University about all those jobs we lost to Asia?
Yeah, that's so this is globalization. And I think that a number of mistakes were made in the push for globalization. And now we're reversing some of those mistakes. So we have let other countries hold us hostage to critical minerals. So that's the sort of thing that you should not offshore. So we will be reshoring, repatriating certain key industries that we cannot afford to let adversaries have influence over us. So I think that the sort of laissez-faire, blind sort of push to globalization didn't take one critical thing into account that we think about all the time in business, and that is risk management. So a lot of this reshoring is going to be
Right.
expensive. So it means that to produce it in the US is going to be more expensive. And what that will do in the medium term is be pressure on inflation, but that extra expense is an insurance premium that we should be willing to pay to have these things produced
Right.
within the US.
What does Mark Carney need to do for your Canada, Professor Harvey?
Well, obviously, Carney is highly experienced in terms of both business experience and central banking experience. My country, Canada, has effectively been in a recession for the last 3 years. And I say that not because of the headline GDP numbers, but if you calculate, and this is what people should do, calculate GDP on a per capita basis. And given the growth in population in Canada, we've had negative GDP growth. So we need somebody to come in and change the course because nobody wants to be in recession for years.